Hi there, this is Toby Jepson, and you're listening to the amazing, the wonderful, the pictorial 80s Picture House.
Hello and welcome to episode 75 of the 80s Picture House and the 22nd of our In Conversation With series. I'm Dave, and as always, I'm joined by my fellow co-host Tom.
Hello.
And today we're joined by a man who he's topped the album charts, he's toured the world, he's produced many bands, he's even rubbed shoulders with the likes of Ridley Scott and Steven Spielberg, and that's just scratching the surface of this guy's career so far. So, we're really very pleased to be rocking the show with the one and only Toby Jepson. How are you, Toby?
How you doing? It's great to be here.
Oh, it's good to have you on indeed, that it is.
Great stuff.
Normally, we'll do a bit about your early years. Before we go into that, I just want to say I was lucky enough to see you at the TIV on your solo acoustic tour just a few months ago.
Oh, yeah.
Great gig, and the Q&A section that you slot in between the songs is... What made you come up with the idea of that? Because it's a bloody good idea.
Well, I mean, I sort of... I've done it a little bit, I've always sort of tried when I've done the solo acoustic stuff to sort of make it a little bit more intimate, a little bit less, formal in a way, because I suppose I get frustrated with artists well, it's up close and personal, because that's what it is when I do those kinds of shows, because it's not the Little Angels, it's not Dio's Disciples or something huge, it's not sort of, it's not the big rock aesthetic. What it is one person stood on a stage with a guitar singing some songs, and I've always felt that music is the great communicator, and I feel that in some respects that relationship between the audience and the artist is totally different in that environment. I think it's so stark and so completely plain as to what it is that I feel that I don't want to be separated from the audience. I write this music for people to be able to comment about it. I want it to help people. I want it to, inspire thought or inspire them in other ways. So I want to discuss that and I want to talk about it. And I also know from years of experience of talking to fans and sort of having done interviews that there's lots of questions that the fans themselves are interested in, which are actually 9 times out of 10 infinitely more interesting and infinitely more insightful than any journalist I've ever met, frankly. So actually, it's just a cool way to interact a little bit with the audience. And I've seen a couple of shows that are like In Conversation With or An Evening With. I went to see Pete Townsend years ago play an acoustic show in a very similar format in the way that I do it now, and he was so gracious and also very angry, which was really fantastic as well, because he, there he was, sort of stood on the stage in front of literally 150 of invited guests, and I was very, very, very lucky to go along with Bill Kerbishy, my manager at the time, and he did the same. He just did exactly that. He was asking people to shout questions from the audience, and he was incredibly honest, and I just thought, that's really cool, that is, because that's completely opened the guy up to me, and I've found out things about Pete Townsend, one of my big heroes, that I would never have found out in an interview, perhaps in a magazine or something. So it always lived with me, that. So I think starting to do this, I felt that break the barriers down. I'm not different to anybody else. I just happen to play a guitar and sing some songs, and I feel that it's not demystifying. It's I think what it is just allowing people access to you a little bit more, especially in this day and age of social media being so accessible, and people all of a sudden you can become friends supposedly with anybody on the planet if they decide or deem it's okay for you to be accepted on their Twitter account or whatever. You know what I mean? So there's a kind of we look at the whole world of this stuff entirely differently, and I've never ever thought of myself as a personality. Or famous. I just don't think of it myself like that at all. And so I feel like I'm kind of one of the people. I want to be one of the people, and so it's a way of basically exploring that.
Are you more comfortable on stage in that sort of environment as opposed to, like, say, with Little Angels or a band behind you?
I wouldn't say comfortable. I think it's I found that the acoustic performances are incredibly demanding because there isn't a band. There's literally, it's just you. And I am not, and I'm not just saying that I am not a very good guitar player. I am a deeply average guitar player, but I don't mind, because my heroes were people like John Lennon and you know, and bizarrely people like Billy Bragg. You know, I always used to love the way that Billy Bragg could stand up on a stage and talk with his fantastic social conscience about the things he believed in, and it just be sat there, on this kind of very basic instrumentation, and so it's a challenge. It's an enormous challenge because I do a 2-hour show pretty much, and it's solid singing from start to finish. Whereas, with a rock and roll band, of course, you can step back and let the guitar player have his bit and let God forbid there be a drum solo. If there is, you can go and have a piss or whatever, So there's a whole different approach to it. I absolutely love being in a rock band and wear the glad rags and sort of leap about with all the lights. But it's an entirely different thing. It's almost like a pantomime when you do that, But I do think the actual acoustic shows are the most challenging performances I do,
Yeah, I mean, because the spotlight literally is just on you, isn't it?
That's it. I mean, you've got nowhere to hide. 9 times out of 10, because I am literally on my own and I don't have a huge name as a solo artist currently. There's not a massive audience, and so it really is a case of trying to engage people on a one-to-one basis, and I really enjoy it. I mean, it's like I say, I'm knackered. By the end of the shows, I'm more tired than I ever am when I'm doing a rock gig, because it's just you just have got nowhere else to go. It's just you, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm only a couple of years older than you. And so I'm really interested in finding out about you growing up, what sort of bands you were listening to, what albums you were buying, and then how you got into the music industry.
Well, I mean, it was. I had a really, really interesting and I'm incredibly grateful to my parents, because my parents were massive music lovers. And I grew up in a household where we didn't have a TV. I mean, my mum and dad weren't wealthy people. We were working class. My dad was a trainee teacher. My mum was a housewife. And so but my dad was a very smart, very canny guy. He still is. He was what I would consider probably the first generation of teenagers, really. Like in terms of listening to contemporary music and pop music, because he was born in 1947, grew up through the sort of post-war austerity period. And just as the whole music scene started to take off with the Beatles, he was coming into his own. I mean, I was born in 1967 when, Sgt. Pepper was released. And so up until that point, there was that massive explosion of great music from the 50s into the 60s where you had to decide what you were, whether you were a mod or a rocker and all that sort of stuff. My dad came down on the side of the mods, actually. He was a first-generation mod, so he used to have his Vespa and his Fishtail Parker and his Levi's, et cetera, et cetera. So I grew up in this environment of the only thing that we had to entertain ourselves, or my mum and dad to entertain themselves, was a really, really old-fashioned record player and an enormous record collection. And my dad had an incredibly eclectic taste, and so I was brought up listening to things like Neil Diamond and Carly Simon on the one hand, but then on the other hand it was Queen and Bread and the Eagles and Led Zeppelin and the blues band, all sorts of things, and lots of soul music as well. Joe Tex and people like that. So I had an incredibly eclectic sort of upbringing of music, and it was always really loud, and it was always great fun, and it was always like I'd wake up to the record player on, and I'd go to bed with the record player on, and I just thought that was what life was about. It was just, it kind of got into my system, and I then progressed as a young kid. I started getting into rock and roll. I can remember the exact time. I remember seeing Freddie Mercury. I can remember Mum and Dad bought us a black and white TV. We moved to this new house up in Yorkshire, and my dad had just got a new job as a teacher, and I think they were feeling a bit flush, so he went and bought us a black and white TV. And I can remember distinctly seeing Freddie Mercury performing "We Are the Champions" on Top of the Pops. It was a piece of film, but he was wearing a crown and a cloak. And I can remember thinking as a kid, that's what I want to do. I can distinctly remember thinking that and thinking, oh my God, what's this music? It's incredible, So that was the first kind of real moment where I recognised what it was. I don't even think, even though I've been brought up with Queen, I probably didn't even recognise who they were, what it was. It was just music. So that I would have been about maybe 10 or 11 at that point, maybe even 9 actually thinking about it. And so that kind of propelled me into sort of wanting to listen to more rock. Eventually, the first single I ever bought was, actually my brother bought, who was 3 years younger than me. He bought Wheels of Steel by Saxon.
Oh, nice.
but he didn't like it. I think he just bought it on a whim, didn't like it, gave it to me. I loved it, and then became a lifelong Saxon fan. And then just it progressed from there. First proper full blown album I ever bought was Sabotage by Sabbath, and then I sort of went into the whole. I got right into the whole mentality of that. I went back into it was Uriah Heep. It was loads of Hendrix. Actually, I absolutely loved Hendrix. And in fact, I was more into guitar players than there was singers for a long, long time. And then it was Ronnie Dio. Discovered Dio, and so it was Rainbow. Elf. And then I'd always had Zeppelin. So Zeppelin was always going on. Then I found Yes a little bit. Then I got into ELP. I'm a bit of a closet progger as well. I quite like a bit of prog. And so they kind of went on from there. And as I kind of got older and older, and I sort of got into my mid-teens, it was all the current things. I think it was, Def Leppard were destroying everybody at the time. They were absolutely huge, and Pyromania became a very, very big record of mine. I used to listen to it every single day. And then the big breakthrough for me, really, in lots of ways, was Holy Diver. That record sort of, in many ways, defined that era for me. Was that sort of upfront guitar sound, that production style, that aggressive level of honesty that Ronnie brought to that record. And I think he kind of, in many ways, I think he isn't applauded enough for it, really. I think that record completely changed. It was a bit of a game changer for a lot of people, certainly for me. And so that was my pursuit then, to sort of be, to try and be as good as that. And it just went on, and that was at the point I started getting into bands, and then, the rest is history, really. It was a kind of discovery along the way as I got into music as a musician, and that changes. You start listening to music differently when you're a player, as you are just as a listener. So, yeah, I mean, there is. I also have an enormous eclectic taste, and that, like I said, I take that off my dad. Whilst I was listening to all the rock and heavy metal, I was listening to the Beatles, and I loved, John Lennon's solo stuff, and I loved the Talking Heads, and the Cult, and all kinds of things. So, and I'm glad of that, because that's made me. I don't really look at music as being. It's just rock. It's just that. I just look upon it. It's either good or bad, and it's as simple as that. My tastes have changed over the years, but that's the sort of basic baseline that I start from.
And then you worked up. We get to the formation of Mr Thrud.
Wonderfully named Mr Thrud, eh? Yeah.
How did you get to the name Mr Thrud?
Well, I mean, I went to sixth form college, and I went there with Mark Plunkett, who was the bass player in the Little Angels. And me and Mark have known each other since we were 7 years old. We went to the junior school and we grew up through the ranks, and we both got into bands. I can remember his favourite band was Status Quo, and I liked Quo at the time. And, he became a big Deep Purple fan, and I was a massive Purple fan. We just grew up together in exactly the same environment, same sorts of families. And we went to sixth form college, and that's where we met Bruce and Jim. Well, Bruce specifically, because Bruce Dickinson was the same age as us. Jim was 3 years younger. And we just put the band together as effectively a sixth form college knockabout. It wasn't anything serious. I'd been in a couple of bands that were, where it had made the decision for me that that's what I wanted to do. I don't think Mark at the time had particularly decided he wanted to be in a band for the rest of his life. He was sort of aiming for a career in as an architect, actually. And Bruce Dickinson wanted to be a music teacher. That was his whole thing. But we got together, we had fun. It was instant, the way that we reacted with each other. It was just like it instantly worked. I don't even want to try and describe it or explain it. It just did. That's the whole thing. You just got to believe in the chemistry. And we put this band together for the TSB Rock School competition, which was a competition that bank ran every year for about 5 or 6 years, I seem to remember. But it was countrywide. And you just all you had to do was send a tape in, and you could take part in the competition. And if you won your heat, then you went through to the final, and there was, I think, a $5,000 prize, which was an enormous amount of money at that point. 1984 or whatever it was. So we did that, but we just couldn't think of a name. And I can remember we were all sat in the sixth form common room, and we were all sat there, and there was literally a Dungeons and Dragons magazine on the table in front of us. And I just picked it up, and we were flicking through it, and there was a cartoon strip called Thrud the Conqueror. And within that cartoon strip, something within that cartoon strip, it said something, and one of the characters called him Mr Thrud, and we all went, "That's it! That's the name!" And it was kind of one of those student-y names. We didn't really, I don't think at the time we expected to be taken too seriously. We weren't being too serious. I mean, we had a song called Ice Cream Thighs, for crying out loud. One called Mad Rampant Stallion, which was, typical 17, 18-year-old sex-obsessed young men, So that was what that was. And, it was only actually, I mean, the TSB Rock Schools competition was completely responsible for the Little Angels, because really we did that competition when we stood up in front of, I think, 2,500 people in Wakefield Rooftop Gardens, which was the venue that we did our heat in. We came miserably last. But we realised it was exactly what we wanted to do, because there was this audience that all reacted so well to the songs, and we couldn't believe it. We felt like we were rock gods right there and then, And so that was when it was born. And I think we all went back home the next day, and we all went, right, this is what we want to do for a living, and there we are.
Can you remember what it was like the first time you got on stage?
Well, I mean, I kind of had some early forays onto stages when I was sort of 12, 13. I played for my my little sister's birthday party and in a little scout hut, and it felt like I was playing Wembley, and that was great. And then I did a couple of little gigs in a band that I was in called Zeus with Mark Plunkett was the bass player, and that was like a little start-up band, So we did a couple of gigs, nothing major, but really in terms of doing real shows, that came from Mr Thrud, and we quickly got a following in and around Scarborough, and it was so exciting. I mean, I don't know whether it's weird or not really, but having talked to other performers, I'm always surprised when someone says, "Oh man, I'm so nervous," because I honestly, God honestly, I've never been nervous going on a stage. I've always had that slight tension. I've always felt I suppose it could be called nerves, but I don't think it really is. What it is, it's an excitement level of, and I can't wait to get on the stage, And so it was, to me, it's never been any different. I mean, I can distinctly remember precisely the feeling that I had the moment I stood on that stage at Rooftop Gardens, which was our first real gig with Mr Thrud, and it never changed. It was just an absolute delight to be out there playing for people and with your mates on a stage making a great big racket. It's fantastic.
Have you got any pre-gig superstitions at all?
Well, I do and I don't. I do some very basic warm-ups. I used to lose my voice an awful lot in the early years, and I went for a bit of training, and I sort of got my head together mentally with what I was supposed to do. And a lot of it is mental training. A lot of it is about, seeing yourself on the stage and being confident enough to go and take that first step and step up to the microphone and all that stuff. But these days, what I do is, the only superstition I have is that if I do a good gig, say in the first 2 or 3 shows, I tend to try and wear the same clothes because it's like a sort of talisman. You don't want to get out of your routine. So I tend to do that. I tend to have a bit of a creature of habit like that on the road. I will wear the same clothes. And if I sort of can't find the same shirt or something, I don't panic. I go, oh God, maybe this is it. Maybe I'm going to fall over. Or, I'm going to lose my voice or something. But genuinely, that hasn't happened. So I've probably been ridiculous. But yeah, I think I just try and stick to the same sort of uniform anyway, because I think that's what it has to be to try and do sort of 12, 13, 14, sometimes more 30 shows sometimes. Back in the day with the Little Angels, that's what it was like. You have to have some sort of routine, otherwise it feels like you're standing on the edge of a precipice every single night if you don't watch it, which in some respects could be good, but I'd kind of prefer to a little bit of a comfort blanket,
Oh, yeah.
So,
and you've got to be on your guard on stage, because if I've done a bit of research right, among other things, you've been punched in the balls on stage.
Yeah, that was difficult. That was. Let me tell you, lads, that was a difficult moment. That was. I mean, I've had a couple of things like that, because this is the whole thing. You don't stop. I've always been a kind of very energetic performer. Certainly when I was a youngster. I mean, me and Bruce, crying out loud, the stuff we used to do. I used to pick him up on stage and twirl him round until we got wrapped in his guitar cable, and the whole thing, we'd all come clattering down in a big heap, and we'd have to pick ourselves up and unwrap it, and he'd come out with scars on his head, and I'd be bruised out. It was ridiculous, he's leaping about and going on. So, but I think you don't stop to think about what that what the audience are thinking about that is I always used to take it as a challenge. I used to think, right, I'm just going to go as crazy as I can tonight because that's what's going to get them excited. And indeed, actually, I've got to say it did work because we'd go into somewhere like the Tonopandi Naval Club in South Wales, where this particular infamous incident happened, and there'd be people sat around tables drinking their warm lager, and they'd be sat down. There wouldn't be. So we'd take that as a challenge. We'd go, okay, we're going to be extra stupid tonight and extra crazy, and we're going to be even louder and even more distinct, and that's how we're going to get them out of their chairs. That was the whole approach. And this particular night, this kid clearly didn't like me, and I was right in the middle of playing this. I think it was No Solution off the first record, and he walked up to the front of the stage. Skinhead, this kid was, and I walked up to the front of the stage. Everyone else was sat down on these tables, and the stage wasn't very high. It was only about 6 inches high, and he looked me square in the eyes. And he was taller than me, and I thought, what the hell is he going to do? I thought, I've just got to carry on, and. He just fisted me square in the knackers, like full pelt, boom. I hit the floor like a sack of spuds, and that was it, game over. I was absolutely in agony, And it was just the biggest shock, and the whole place went like that. There's a whole sort of sharp intake of breath. So, yeah, there's been a few like that. I've fallen off stages before quite a few times, which has been good fun, but... not for trusses, not for speaker stacks and things, but hey, that's rock and roll. What can you do?
Oh God, yeah. Let's get into your recording then. You go in and Mr Thrud EP.
Yeah.
How did the deal for that come about?
Well, I mean, with Mr Thrud, we just used to do. It was basically our own home recordings when we were back in the day because we couldn't afford to go into studios. It was just impossible, and. We didn't have a plan. I mean, all we had was a 4-track recorder that belonged to Brucey's dad, and we just used to use that all the time. And we just used to get quite good at making these little recordings. And the early Mr Thrud demos were done on literally a cassette 4-track player, just like everyone used to have, And then that progressed into sort of playing gigs and getting gigs and all that. And eventually we sort of met our manager at the time, Kevin Nixon, who was a sort of quite a big name from around the region. He ran a little record label called Power Station Records from York. And he came to see us play and got interested and involved. And he sort of said, look, I think you need to do some proper recording. So we raised the money, and he helped us sort of put a plan together to go and do that recording. And the first ever professional, if you like, serious recording we ever really did was at a place called Fairview Studios in Hull, which is the place that Def Leppard recorded their Bludgeon Rafiola EP, the very first thing they ever recorded, and by the same producer, Roy Neve. And so we were very lucky. We fell into this situation where he'd already worked with a rock band similar to us, and he knew what the score was. And we went and worked with this guy who we thought was just like a genius, Mm-hmm. And what he really was just a good engineer. Not taking anything away from the guy. So that ended up being our first EP, the '87 EP, which was independently produced by us. And then Kevin Nixon then took it, signed us to Power Station Records, and we put that out as our first fully fledged barcoded, catalogue numbered record, which was the key, and that led on to the Polydor record deal, which was about 3 years later, something like that. So it was a slow progression. We had to start somewhere, and this is the whole thing about modern day. I think people can make records so easily these days. I mean, in Pro Tools in their bedrooms, that actually that process of having to go through not being very good and having to sort of learn your craft, that's gone now. Because it can all be corrected. Pro Tools can tune things, it can put things in time. You can cut and paste things. You don't have to be any good at playing an instrument anymore. You can just play it once and duplicate it. It's sad actually, because I don't think records are made have the same heart about them anymore. That's what, in many ways, as a producer, I'm trying to do. I kind of refuse to work with artists unless they have that in them now. You know what I mean? That's my take on it, if you like. Yeah. And that grounding of making records like that has been very important for this part of my life, And
we're going to touch on your producing in just a little bit. But even back then, were you taking notes as far as production goes, with maybe an eye to doing it in the future?
No, never with an eye to doing it in the future. No, I was just going along for the ride. I mean, I just liked all the pretty lights and the fact that it all sounded nice and loud in the control room. There's nothing better than sitting back at the back of the studio with all the lights down and watching all the engineers sort of pushing all the faders. And I mean, back in the day, people have no idea these days how we used to make records. I mean, I can remember at Fairview Studios, nothing was automated. It was all utterly manual. And so if you were trying to do like a mix whereby you had to mute something, the entire band would stand around the desk and Roy would say to us, right, Toby, at the start of verse 2, I want you to press that mute button in there, and then I want you to push that fader up to this point here. And every single person would have a job to make the mix happen. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but it's absolutely the truth. Now it's just a computer move. Now it's like, oh, we'll just do the computer can do that. I'll just put that into the computer. And anyone can do that. But it really was hands-on. And 9 times out of 10, you have to do several passes on the mix because you wouldn't get the mix right. Someone would have missed the mute button, or someone would have missed the fader, or someone wouldn't turn the reverb up at the right time or something. So there was a kind of whole real art to it, proper physical art to it. And so I think really that whole experience was massively important. Mm-hmm. And I think what happens is that it goes into your head. You can't evaluate it properly because you're not old and you're not smart enough. You don't have enough experience, but it goes in. You understand what works. You know that if you press that button, that will happen. And if you do that, this will happen. And if you put a microphone on that instrument like that, that'll make it sound good. And you kind of get to understand it. And I work with some amazing producers. I mean, the Little Angels worked with Eddie Kramer, recorded Led Zeppelin and Hendrix and endless amounts of other people. And and we work with Bob Clearmountain, and we work with Mike Fraser, and just some incredible people. So when you're in that environment and the guy is going, you inevitably go, well, how do you make it sound like that, Mike? Or Bob or whatever, and he'll go, well, man, if you just do this, you just turn this, you just do that, and then you just get to you just get to learn it. And it just became a kind of, I don't know, you get a head for it. You know that you're going in the studio to do a certain thing, and it becomes a kind of job of work. It's like learning to be a great carpenter or something. You learn how to use a plane or cut a piece of wood properly, or whatever,
So at what point did Mr Thrud become a Little Angels?
Well, that's kind of it's quite an interesting tale. We were absolutely determined to keep hold of the name, and Kevin Nixon, who was an awful lot smarter than us at the time, said, no, you've got to change the name. You could never get a record deal with a name like it's stupid. And we were like, no, it's brilliant. It's so quirky, man, and all this stuff. And of course it wasn't. It was just ridiculous. And so no one's ever going to take us seriously. But what happened was we did a gig, and Kevin was saying, look, you've got to change your name. I'll manage you, and we'll do this and we'll do that, but you've got to change the name. And we did a gig. We used to do this. We did a residency in many ways, what can be loosely described as a residency, at a place called the Stephen Joseph Theatre in the Round, at a club called the Square Cat. We've got in Scarborough, that theatre is famous for having Alan Ayckbourn as its resident playwright. And Alan Ayckbourn, as most people know, is one of the world's most prolific, most successful playwrights. But a guy that used to be Alan's musical director, Paul Todd, used to run these musical evenings on a Sunday night, and we used to go down there. We used to invariably be the opening act for bigger acts, and so we used to go and play pretty much every Sunday. Or if we missed a week, it was very rare. And we used to get these, and as we were getting better and better and playing with all these cool bands as an opening act, we were getting better and better, and we used to get decent reviews. And I can remember that we got a review from a local journalist who said that we looked like, I mean, it's a bit cliche, but she said, oh, these guys played like the devil but looked like little angels. And Kevin rang us up that morning because we'd sent him the paper. He said, oh, that's the name. That's it. We're going to call you. That's a brilliant name. And it was one of those happen chance things. And I think that's where the best names come from. You can't think of a great name. It just comes to you. You know what I mean? And yeah. And it happened very quickly. We all went, actually, he's absolutely right. And the rest is history. The name stuck. We went into the sort of whole searching for a deal situation, and it worked for us,
Yeah, I remember when Too Posh to Mosh was advertising Kerrang as well. I mean, it's getting around the time. I was talking to Thom about this before we started recording. This is the time when I first became aware of you and Little Angels, and it's thanks to it's a guy I've mentioned on the podcast before, Ike. It's me and him went to so many gigs in the 80s, and it's thanks to his better memory than mine that he said, he's even given me the date. He said it was November the 24th, 1988, and Little Angels were supporting Cinderella. That was the first time.
Wow!
That I saw you on stage then.
Wow, no, absolutely. I mean, I found, just an unbelievable, amazing time. I mean, we were the first band to ever open for Guns N' Roses in the UK. I mean, we really were. We went down to London I talk about this quite a lot, because it is an incredible thing to experience. We went down to London. We got very friendly with this guy called Bush, who used to be the booking agent at the Marquee Club in Wardour Street, when it used to be at Wardour Street, when there used to be a Marquee, Bush absolutely loved our band. He said, "Oh no, man, you guys can open it, open any time. You want, just let me know, and when you're available and stuff like that." And he rang us. Well, Kevin rang me one morning. He said, "Look, you got to go to London tonight. You've got this, or he rang us in the morning. You've got to drive down." That's what we used to be like. Because we used to own a van with the gear already packed in it, and he used to ring us up and say, "You got a gig so and so. You got a gig so and so." Because that's what it's like when you're a young band. You can't plan anything. So he rang us up and said, "You got to go to London tonight. Get in the van. You're opening for a band called Guns N' Roses, and they're from America." We went, "Oh, okay, we'll go and see what they're like." But by this point, we'd had a few gigs, we'd done a couple of things, and we thought we were made of flipping. We thought we were made of steel. We thought we were the greatest rock band on the planet. And of course, we go down to the Marquee Club and open for this incredible band. I mean, to this day, I can swear to God, they are the greatest live band I've ever seen. They're the greatest live musical experience I've ever been part of. It was extraordinary how good that band were, and they completely and utterly decimated us. They turned a little band who thought they were big into tiny little micro dots of nothingness. They really did. And we went back to Scarborough with a tail between our legs, but it taught us a massive lesson. It taught us to be good. It taught us that what we had to do was work really hard and not pretend that we were a band. You had to be a band. You can't just pretend that you have read enough magazines or listened to enough records and that's going to be enough to turn you into a band. You've got to live and breathe it, because that's the only way to make it work. And that's the best advice I could give anybody, is that you can't, and that hasn't changed. That will never change. You have to be utterly committed to being good at it, and that takes a lot of effort. And so we went back to Scarborough and we literally rehearsed 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and we gave up every single ounce of our spare time until we started. I mean, until we got good. And we went from being average to being pretty good in quite a short space of time. Within 6 months to a year, we were a completely different band. And that led to people taking notice of us, because we really were able to stand our ground with bands like, we opened for Terraplane, and we opened for Chrome Molly, and we opened for Faith No More and Tesla and all these bands, and we could stand our own because we actually had put the effort in. So it was an incredible time. Really, really was an incredible time. And that Cinderella tour was out of this world, because we'd never been in front of audiences that big before.
I think until not too long ago, I'd still got the T-shirt from it as well.
And I honestly, I can so distinctly remember it, because the guys from Cinderella were awesome to us. Tom Kiefer became a real good friend, and he was an extraordinarily supportive guy, and they were brilliant. They were just a brilliant band to be part, to sort of tour with. I can remember every single gig pretty much as we did it. It was just absolutely brilliant. Brilliant time.
At that stage of your career as well, were there any bands that you were, starstruck's the wrong word, maybe in awe of when you got there?
What, that we opened for, or
yeah.
Time? Well, I think I've always been in awe of anyone that can play instruments and get on a stage. I mean, I was a cocky little git, because because you have to be. I mean, let's make no bones about it. To stand up in front of an audience, you have to have a bit of an ego. I mean, egos are underrated. You need one. There's no two ways about it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be ego to do it. It's ego just denotes a level of confidence. It just depends how far you're willing to push it. You know what I mean? There are those that go well over the top and those that don't. I mean, it was always a joy for me, and I always used to take every experience as a learning experience. We always used to say that to each other. This is just a massive learning experience. Let's just watch them. Let's stand at the side of the stage if we're allowed. Let's just listen to what they do. I used to sort of listen to the singers and what they used to say between the songs and how well the songs were, sequenced, and how did a band come on stage and play 3 songs off the bat without saying a word, and then or did they say something after the first song, and etc. etc. So it became a massive learning experience. So I was always in awe of everybody. I mean, Faith No More were extraordinary. Again, that was at the Marquee Club, but that was with their first singer. I forget the guy's name now, but he had dreads. It was absolutely brilliant band. They were so unusual, and that helped us a lot, because one thing that's always been levelled at as a criticism, but I always take it as a compliment, is that we were very eclectic, the Little Angels, and I'm glad we were. I'm glad that we explored a lot of different styles and we were able to turn it into our own music. But I just think it's you quickly understand when you're a young band how difficult it is to be a musician and be in a band that works. You quickly become to understand that, because when you've slept on top of a 4x12 in the back of a van in the freezing cold winter in south of Wales, or you've had to sleep inside a club on a piss-stained floor in your sleeping bag because that's the only way you can afford to do the gig. When you've done that, you quickly start to lose. It starts to lose its luster a little bit. You know, it's no longer about diamonds and pearls. It's actually about making a living and getting to a point where you use that energy, that's determination, that determined sort of I don't know. It's a sort of war of attrition between you and the industry. You just want to get there and make it happen, you know, and that becomes your driving force. You know, we don't want to sleep on this pissing wet floor anymore. We want to become a rock and roll band. But actually, the very fact you're sleeping on the floor is the reason why you can become a rock and roll band. Do you know what I mean? It's a self sort of perpetuating thing, if you like. You know?
Oh yeah. Were there any bands on the opposite end of the scale then as well that disappointed you? Maybe just going through the motions when they got on stage. You can name and shame. Go on.
No, I mean, I don't know really. I mean, I don't think so. I have to be honest, no, because I honestly can't draw anyone to mind. I've had a couple of big disappointments on meeting certain people, which will remain nameless because I don't sling the mud. I'm not interested in that. Really. But that was just more to do with personality. You know,
Yeah.
In fact, one of the people that I'm talking about here is one of the biggest, you know, rock stars of all time, and it was a massive disappointment to me. But that was just because actually, we just didn't get on. You know, it was a personality clash. But actually, when he was on the stage performing, it was unbelievable, and I could hardly deny the fact he thoroughly deserved to be there. You know, it wasn't that. It wasn't. I didn't feel that there was a kind of going through the motions thing. It was more an arrogance sort of thing, an arrogant position, and occupied it, even though there was no need to, because that guy was that guy who he was, and someone who I grew up with, type of thing. You know, so it's not. I honestly think every single band I've ever played with and worked with, by and large, 90.99% has been absolutely professional and thoroughly brilliant at what they do. Actually, the irony is, in a way, that a lot of the bands that are the cockiest and think they're the best are the ones that haven't gone anywhere. Are the people that are on the very early stages of their career. You know, I mean, as a producer, I meet that attitude all the time. You know.
Yeah. And it's good, or you as an example of how you should be. It's like, as a fan of music, and Tom as well, I'm sure you'll agree, Tom, when you go to see bands, it's like when you took the time after the gig a couple of months ago, you made sure that nobody went without meeting you, if you wanted a photograph, if you wanted an autograph. Does that now and again ever sort of go, oh, I need to, you know, I'm tired, I've done a gig, I need to go either back home or to the next gig? Is there ever a sense of, oh,
no, never? No, honestly, I could honestly say never, because I am so. I mean, I really mean this. I am so grateful that people have made the effort. I mean, take that you know, the TIV. If there were 60 people there, I'd be surprised. You know, it's a cavern of a place. It was freezing. You know, but everyone's turned out midweek, I think it was.
It was, yeah.
Wednesday or something. You know, they turned out to see me play my songs. They paid money to be there. It's what. You know, what kind of twat would I be if I didn't make some effort, you know, to sort of say thank you very much? Because actually, with that sized audience, and you know what, this is really, really true as well. I don't care how many people I play in front of. It's the same for me. I mean, I know it's a tired old cliche. People say it all the time, but it's really true. It's a cliche because it's absolutely true. That it doesn't matter to me and to most artists that if you're two people in the audience or 200,000, it doesn't matter, because the fact is, you know, if you've got any sense about you, that the only reason that you're on that stage is those people have made that effort, because that's the fact. And so I just think the relationship's really it's really clear to me. I owe my living, and I owe the reason why I'm on that stage to people that have physically turned up and to make the effort to come and see me play. So everyone deserves the opportunity, and I recognise what you know. I also recognise that it's important. I am the artist, and you're the audience, or they're the audience. So I recognise where those lines of delineation are, and I don't want to be everyone's mate. But what I do want to do is I want to be accessible. I want people to be able to say whatever they want to me, whether it's like that was crap or that was good, and we can talk about it, and I'll continue to be an artist, and they can go back and either continue to like me or not. You know, I think that's the relationship. But I've never felt that it's my right to be there, never, and I've never felt that. that my music deserves to be listened to. I've always felt that if people listen to it, then I'm really chuffed about that, and I'm grateful. Simple as.
Oh yeah, I think you're to be commended for that. I thought it was fantastic that you took the time to do that for everybody that was there. I thought it was really, really good.
No, it's absolutely fine for me, and no, it's good. It's good. It's good, and it's great meeting people. And of course, I've met so many people I've continue to have relationships with all the way through my career that keep popping up, and that keep coming to the shows. It's an amazing thing that they can be bothered. It's fantastic.
Oh yeah. Now, for any listeners that are listening to this that may not be too familiar with Little Angels, do you want to talk them through? We've got your first album now. You recorded with the Little album. Your career went pretty big, pretty quick, didn't it? You just getting more and more successful.
No, it was an incredible success story, really, especially given where we came from. I mean, we come from a little tiny town called Scarborough. It wasn't on the northeast coast. It's not a big place. It certainly isn't the centre of rock and roll. And so it wasn't like we lived. What I mean is, it wasn't like we lived in Leeds or we lived in Manchester or Birmingham or London. It wasn't like we kind of had access to all the venues and you're immediately amongst everything. We literally grew up on a seaside town, and it was all about getting out of that town. And so, we just dug our heels in, pal. We just got on with it. We just made the effort. And we were surprised, actually, how, and I mean this not to shine ourselves on at all here, but we were amazed how good we were against a lot of other bands out of bigger cities. And I think it was because we came from a tiny little town that we didn't have any distractions. It wasn't like we even had anyone to compare ourselves to. We just wrote songs, rehearsed, performed, came back, got better, did a bit more, wrote a few more songs, just carried on. And we just kept getting shows. Eventually we signed to Polydor Records in 1988 or 9, I think it was, 88. And, we got an 8-album record deal. And that was when people were giving record deals away. And at the time, we were incredibly lucky. There is a massive element of luck about this business, and we were certainly very, very lucky because at the time Bon Jovi and Def Leppard, but specifically Bon Jovi, had erupted all over the globe at radio level. Now, rock at the time, you'll probably remember this, rock at the time was not on the radio. It just didn't appear. I can remember rushing back to sort of watch Top of the Pops on a Thursday night, hoping that there'd be some kind of rock on it. You'd wait, and maybe Saxon would turn up every now and again, or Status Quo, and you'd be like, "Oh my God, there's a rock band! I can't believe it!" But it was so few and far between because disco was massive. It was all that stuff, and and then of course it was all the sort of the British pop scene erupted with Haircut 100 and all that was that period. Duran Duran, etc. And so it was an extraordinary time to be a rock band when Bon Jovi broke through, got on the radio. Living on a Prayer was massive. It was global. All of a sudden, it was cool to have long hair. It was cool to have pop aesthetic, etc., etc. So the record labels were out for bands that could do that. Because record labels are not smart. All they do is look at the market and go, right, that's good, that's successful. Somebody's been smart enough to have that band, sign that band and work on them. Right, we'll have one of our own. And that's exactly what they did. Polydor just wanted their version of Bon Jovi. And so that's why we got signed. I don't even think it was because of the songs. I think it's because I had long blonde hair and there was five of us with a keyboard player. I literally think that's what it was. And so we kind of got our deal like that. And, we quickly started working with some very serious producers and some serious. I did a lot of co-writing with Jim Vallance, who wrote a lot of the stuff for Bryan Adams and for Aerosmith, and and worked with Hugh Cornwell from the Stranglers, which might have been a bit of an odd choice, but Hugh was a brilliant songwriter, and we did some great work together on that. Worked with Billy Nichols, who wrote a lot of stuff was the musical director for the Who, so he was an amazing guy. So we worked with a lot of very cool people very quickly. We made a very good first album, even though it was difficult. And we had a couple of EPs before that helped to sort of cement the band's reputation on the live scene. We did the whole Cinderella tour. And we toured with Marillion and this, that, and the other. But it was on the second album that we sort of started to break because we realised that we needed to have hits, and we'd had sort of our first bona fide hit with Radical Your Lover, which was a single that actually was never supposed to be a single. In fact, the first album, Don't Pray For Me, was failing. It was absolutely failing. And the record label were pulling their hair out because they spent a lot of money on us. And they said, look, we need another single here. We have to have another single. What can we do about, how can we do this? And Kevin, our manager at the time, said, look, I think that song Radical Your Lover is a hit record waiting to happen. And he said, but we've got to re-record it. But Polydor It's quite interesting tale. Polydor would not give us the money to re-record the song, because me and Bruce had written the song with Dan Reed. I don't know if you remember Dan Reed Network.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Sorry about the dog in the background there.
It's all right.
This is rock and roll as it's happening, pal. We're at home, home of the rock star, apparently. So I'd written this song with Dan Reed. Me and Bruce had written it, and we you know what it had been? It had been an extra track on the first version of the album. Can you believe that? And so, but Kevin had very smartly sort of realised that there was something in that tune, and he said, "Look, let's go and re-record it." So Polydor wouldn't give us the money. So what they did was he very sneakily, as I remember, my memory of it is that he said to him, "Look, we need a demo budget to record some new songs for the next album." But we used that demo budget to re-record Prodigal Your Lover, and we did it in 24 hours. We literally had a lockout in a studio called Slaughterhouse Studios in Driffield. And that was the first time we used Stephen Harris, who subsequently became an engineer that worked on all of our albums pretty much, and then has worked with me and mixed albums for me as a producer. And Steve recorded and mixed this track in 24 hours, and that was the first time we ever used the Big Bad Horns, and it completely and utterly changed our lives, because we went to Radio 1 with it. Mark Goodyear, who was a big DJ, the most popular DJ on Radio 1 at the time, absolutely loved the track and went against his producer's wishes and played the track every single day, sometimes twice on his show, and it just gave us a hit record. It put us in the charts. The next minute we're on Top of the Pops and blah blah blah. But so then we had to follow that up, and we had to do our second album, and we did this album called Young Gods, which by this point we realised we needed to write proper bona fide hits, and we changed our thinking, and we wrote with again with Jim Valance and a number of other people that really helped us sort of bring our songwriting on, and my songwriting on specifically, because I was writing the lion's share. And we had a couple of hits off of that, Boneyard, and Ain't Gonna Cry, and Young Gods. And again, that put us into the city halls, and next thing we're headlining Hammersmith Apollo and Manchester Apollo, and we're in America playing shows, and we're in Europe, and we're opening for a big German band out there, and we were doing festival shows and stadium shows with ZZ Top and Bryan Adams, and it just went through the roof. Next album, then it was next album, and Jam became a million-selling record, and we had a number of big hits off of that. One, Too Much Younger Than Womankind, which was top 20. And it was just a very slow progression. I mean, this happened over a long period of time, of course. It wasn't something that happened overnight.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a really, really exciting. And what was great about it was that it never felt like we hadn't worked for it. We had to... Every time that we got to the end of an album campaign, we recalibrated. Okay, what do we need to do now? What can we do to better ourselves? Where are we moving on from here? What do we want to do? Who else do we want to try to work with? It was never a closed shop. Oh, this is just what we are. It was very much a progressive thing, and so I really, 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 really enjoyed that, and I miss it actually. I miss that that camaraderie and that feeling about, okay, we've done that. What do we do next? Type of thing. And that's extraordinarily exciting to take part in something like that.
Oh yeah. And you said about Jam, this million seller, it went straight in at number 1. What was the story then between Jam was released? I mean, Little Angels were really, really huge, and then the '94 gig, the last gig at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's how long have you got? I mean, we could talk all night about this. In a nutshell, there was cracks appearing in the personalities within the band. You got to remember, people forget most people who are not in bands don't understand what it's like to be in a band. It's 24/7. You think, you live, breathe, think, sleep, get up, eat. Everything you're doing is for the band. Every decision you make is for the band. Your personal lives go out the window. I'd gone through a divorce. I was about to get married to my now wife. The guy, everyone was kind of changing. We were growing up. We'd started out as young kids, man. I mean, we were 17, 18 years old when we got our record deals. Jim was 16 when we got his record deal. I mean, it's ridiculous. But Jim's parents had to sign his record deal. He wasn't allowed to sign it. I mean, that's the truth. So we were growing up in the public spotlight, being these young kids and growing up and becoming men, and all of a sudden your priorities change and things happen, and you all go, you start to go your mental and emotional separate ways in lots of ways. And the problem is, and I'm not going to sort of point the fingers and name names at all, but there were certain elements, not just in the band, because actually that was okay, really, in lots of ways. I think we could have got over ourselves in lots of ways. But, you know, there are lots of people involved with us: management, record label, publishers, agents. Everyone was on the take. Everyone was making money out of us, as is natural in these circumstances. But the only people that weren't making money was us. You know, that was one thing. I think there was a lot of frustration about that, you know, we were seeing all these hundreds of thousands of pounds from shows and tours and et cetera, sort of seemingly disappearing down a deep, dark hole. But, you know, the record label had put millions of pounds into us to sort of record our music, and so it was all going back to be recouped. But it is difficult when you sort of, you know, you've done Hammersmith Apollo, your album's gone at #1, and, you know, you've had a top two or three top 40 hits, and you still can't pay your rent. It's really bloody difficult, you know, and that's that's what it was. I mean, I can remember we were on 200 quid a week, and our album was in #1, and we had a top 20 single, and we were playing every single, you know, we were playing sold out shows at Hammersmith, and I literally couldn't scrape 2 pennies together. It was ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So I think it was very, very tough. I mean, and the thing is, you see, this is a lot of stuff that people don't know. I mean, I can remember talking to the guy out of Deacon Blue, I forget the guy's name, the singer, and you know, he was, you know, they were in exactly the same situation as we were, you know, and so were the Wonder Stuff. You know, all these bands that were really big at the time. Everyone was suffering from the sort of the situation that the record industry was in at the time, because the record industry at the time used to spend money like it was going out of fashion. It was like, oh, okay, you want to fly over to so-and-so? All right, okay, we'll put you on a private jet, then we'll do that. Okay. But of course, at the time, you don't know that it's going on your recoupment bill, because it's their money, so it's going on your bill. So, you know, you might be getting large advances for your publishing or large advances for your record deal, but the fact of the matter is, I can tell you now, my guitar technician was getting paid 3 times as much as me to be my roadie. And but that is the truth, and that's just the way it was. That's just the way it was, and it was the same way for a lot of bands. Unless you have a hit record, single one on album one, straight out the box, you're always playing catch up with your record label. That's the way it was back in the day. Mm-hmm. So it was really, really tough, and so we kind of reached this impasse really, where Polydor, there was 2 strands to it. Polydor had lost a little bit of faith because we'd sold a lot of records, but they clearly weren't making the money back. We weren't making any money. The whole situation in the music business was changing. Garage rock had started to come in. You know, the whole sort of Seattle sound had started to erupt, and Nirvana were massive, and Alice in Chains were exploding, and all the rest of it. So the hair metal days were sort of in what, you know, people used to loosely call us, which I think is an utterly ridiculous thing. I hate labels. Absolutely stupid to call anybody anything. You know, we were just a guitar band as far as I'm concerned. You know, but you know, the fact of the matter is, the industry looked at us and gone, well, they look like a bunch of dinosaurs. This is like guys at 24 years old, you know, 24, 25. Oh, no. So it was a case of, well, what do we do? How do we get over this? And Polydor, I think, you know, we're getting a bit nervous. And so our managers came to us and said, look, you know, this situation's a bit untenable. What we're going to do? And we kind of, in many ways, got forced into a corner. I mean, I honestly, hand on heart, don't really know why the band split up. It just ended up being a bunch of decisions that was taken at the time where it seemed impossible to carry on. But the reality is, I think we could have easily ridden the storm out if people had been a bit smarter and we'd been handled better by managers and by the label and by other people at large. And the sadness of it is when the band split up, we were at the top of our game. We were as good as we were ever going to be, and we could easily have made more records. And we went off and made a crappy attempt at doing an independent release that didn't do anything, and that was it. It was game over. We'd lost. Various people had lost faith in the band, and next minute I'm stood there thinking, "What the fuck just happened there?" You know what I mean? Literally. You know, and so that's the way it happened for us. So it was a case of then, well, what do? You've got to pick yourself up and carry on somehow. You know.
And you did so. I mean, for anybody that doesn't know, that last gig was at the Albert Hall of all places as well. What a gig! What a huge gig that is.
Oh, it was. I mean, I think we still hold the record of the most amount of people in the Royal Albert Hall by default. I've got to say, because they're taking all the seats out of the very, very top circle. So instead of it holding 250 people in the top circle, the manager of the theatre said to us, "Look, we can put more people up there because it's standing room." So we ended up having something like 500 extra people in the building that could have actually been in there. So we still hold the record at the Royal Albert for the most amount of people ever, sort of thing. You know, so I think it was 7,500 or 8,000 people. It was pretty extraordinary. You know?
Oh yeah. So what did you do then? I mean, you're at a major crossroads of your life. Then you could have either just thrown the towel in and got really depressed, or you could have
Yeah.
fought, or you could have fought on as well. I mean,
Well,
come on, you didn't give up, that's for sure.
no, well, it was a combination of all those things you just said. It was loads of depression, loads of not wanting to give up, loads of falling over and making a complete fool of myself, and then picking myself up again. I don't know, man. You just have to, you know. We existed in a bubble. Bands that do and did what the Little Angels did. You exist in this kind of environment which is completely protected. We had managers and we had this whole situation where we were told what to do. I'd get a phone call. We've got to be here. We've got to be there. This is the schedule. We'll have meetings. And what your life is mapped out for about a year, maybe 2 years, So for it to come to a solid close, a resounding stop, it was like, okay, so I haven't got a plan. What am I doing next week? What's going to happen? And so I sort of took a bit of time to think about it. Did a bit of world travel. Me and my girlfriend, who then became my wife, did a bit of traveling. Went to America and sort of bummed around for a few weeks and did a bit of that. And I sort of sat around doing a lot of writing and sort of soul searching, trying to figure it out. And eventually I made a solo record with Sony money. I was still signed to Sony Publishing, and a fantastic guy called Blair McDonald, who was my publisher at the time, said, look, I'll give you the money, go buy some gear, hold yourself up in your house, make a record, and we'll find a way to put it out. And so that's what we did. I ended up putting out my first solo record, Ignorance is Bliss, through Kevin Nixon, who was our manager's. He had a little label, and I signed a little deal with him, and I put it out through that. And unfortunately, for a number of reasons, I mean, it's been talked about a lot, but I just was not equipped to deal with it. I was kind of managing myself. Me and Kevin split up right in the middle of making the album. We finished the mix of the album actually. Kevin just deserted me. He didn't want to be my manager anymore. So I just found myself with this album on Sony money, with a tour booked through ITB, who were my agency, with a band that were unschooled, who weren't really good enough, frankly, and trying to sort of make sense of it all. And I got on the road and I got really, really, really stressed out. And I ended up getting really poorly and ended up sort of having to cancel most of the tour because I got pneumonia and I was literally had to recoup. I had to go, regroup and go home and kind of get better. It took me about 6 to 8 months to kind of recover from having full-blown pneumonia, and it really put the kibosh on it for me. I just sort of thought, you know what, I've had it with the music business. It can go fuck itself. I've had enough. You know what I mean? So it was a case of what else do I do? And what I did is I went back to Scarborough. Me and my then wife went back up to Scarborough, and we sort of licking our wounds. And I started writing songs again and working with a number of pop people, and I worked with some pop artists and pop songwriters, and just had a go, and then, cut a long story short, I did a load of demos, etc. So nothing kind of came of it. I couldn't really make any sense of it, and I ended up going into the film business, funnily enough, which was really exciting. I don't know how long you've got. I can explain all that if you want me to. But
oh yeah, please do. Yeah, as long as you've got the time, we'll happily listen
no,
to
no,
you.
no,
Definitely.
No. I mean, it was one of those kind of situations that was, how there are signposts in the road, in your life where you don't know what you want to do. You haven't got a clue what's going on. Me and my wife, by this point, had moved back down to Bristol. I kind of had a little bit of a sort of situation where I'd been writing a load of songs. I'd done a load of stuff. Then I had this kind of bizarre situation with Van Halen where I'd got word through a friend of mine who worked for Van Halen that my name was on the top of a list for new singers. This was before Gary Sharon joined them after Sammy Hagar left. And so I got all excited and rang this guy up who worked for, he was actually a guy from Harrogate, but he used to run their LA sound systems. And so he worked at their offices in LA. So I rang him up and said, look, Roger, is this true? I mean, he said, oh yeah, man. He says, I've seen the list and your name's on the top of it, and Eddie wants to speak to you and he wants to do this, he wants to do that. So of course I'm thinking, I'm going to be in Van Halen. Oh my God, I can't believe it. This is the dream ticket, So I sort of then started, getting ready for it, got fit, lost a load of weight, all the rest of all the normal stuff, got ready for this golden phone call that never came, so that all sort of went by the by. So I kind of thought, oh, well, whatever, at least I sort of made the effort. So I went back down to Bristol. We moved back down to Bristol to sort of get back into the music business because it was a big city. That's where my wife came from. So, and I sort of wrote with a load of people again down there, did a bit more, but nothing was happening. It felt like I was treading water. It felt like I was wading through treacle. And my sort of personal way of writing songs didn't seem to be very in vogue at the time. It was the music business at that time was heavily, especially on Radio 1, who I still felt was the place to be, was heavily involved with dance music and also the Manchester rock scene, the sort of Oasis and and all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very hard to see a way into the rock business. I mean, all those bands I used to listen to just seemingly disappeared. Bon Jovi was sort of not really doing very much. Leopard had sort of disappeared off the scene. It was very hard to sort of see a way forward. So I kind of thought, well, I've got to do something else, So I saw an advert I was visiting a friend in Farnham in Surrey, and I saw in the Surrey Advertiser an advert for it. It literally said Ridley Scott, who's one of my favourite film directors, massive fan of his, said Ridley Scott's new epic shooting in Farnham. All men, any men, and mainly men, actually men. I think he said just men between the ages of 35 and 55. Please come down for open casting on this date, and it happened to be the next day. So I thought, well, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go do that, So I literally went and queued up with 2,000 other people outside of the this place in Farnham. I went through the whole process. It took about 4 hours to get through it. Eventually got a phone call 2 or 3 days later saying, yes, we want you to be part of the film. Can you be in Farnham? They filmed all that big scene at the beginning of the movie in a place called the Bourne Wood, which is in Surrey, near Farnham, which is outside of Farnham. And that was it. I was involved in the film business. Next minute, I was on a set with Ridley Scott with his bullhorn shouting, into all these ADs running around, and these massive sets built on the mountainside and just in the forest, and just incredible. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I was like, this is what I want to do. Fuck the music business. This is it. I'm going to do this, and immediately sort of started to get friendly with a lot of the ADs and. Because a lot of the music business is very similar to the film business. It's all about actually being smart enough to stay the distance. And because I'd had that experience of being a young rock band and having to sleep on the pissy wet floor and having to sort of make ends meet and sort of live on very little food, etc., etc., I knew what that felt like. And actually being an extra, because that's what I was. All I was an extra. That's exactly the same thing as a film business. You have to stand around for bloody hours in the pissing rain half the time, waiting for someone to tell you what to do. And the 9 times out of 10, they film you from a distance you've never seen anyway. So it's a big learning curve, So I roughly spent 3 years in that business, and I went from film to film. I did Sleepy Hollow, I did The Visitors, I did Angela's Ashes, I did various episodes of Casualty. I did quite a few other TV programs at the time that were sort of those hour-long sort of drama type things, And eventually I became a stand-in for Christopher Lambert on the last Highlander movie that he was in called Highlander Endgame, and I became Chrissy's stand-in for a while. And that led me into being a stand-in on the Band of Brothers TV series, which was a big wartime TV series. I don't know if you remember it at all.
Oh, yeah.
It was a BBC HBO co-production, and I worked on that show for 10 months, and I became Damian Lewis's personal stand-in and worked for a lot of the other actors, that were on that ensemble series. But at the same time, whilst I was doing that, I was still writing songs. I was still going home at the weekends because we were living up in Scarborough again by this point. I'd gone back to Scarborough, but I was commuting. It was ridiculous, I used to live down south. I moved back to Scarborough, and I was commuting back down to Hatfield to work on the bloody TV series, So it was a real drag, but it was incredible experience. I met some amazing people, including Steven Spielberg, which was extraordinary because he's another massive hero of mine. And so, brilliant time, brilliant experiences. But what it taught me was that unless you're enormously skilled in the film business, unless you actually have a proper trade, being a camera operator, or you somehow become an AD, or you somehow get into special effects, or blah blah blah. It's very hard to break in because it's a bit of a closed shop. There's people know people, and you've got to work your way through the system. And by this point, I'm like 30 odd years old, and it's like, well, I'm never gonna. It take me 10 years, to get to a point. At that point, I'll be 40. You know what I mean? It wouldn't. I never really could see that it would be kind of a long term thing. So, I'd kind of. Right at the time I was about to finish working on Band of Brothers, I'd got offered another publishing deal through some songs that I'd written and been touting about, and so that rescued me. Really, it put me back in the music business, and I sort of all of a sudden the doors are open again for the music.
So, well, leading on from that, how did you come to be working with Fastway and Gunn?
Oh, right. Well, again, it's just again a crazy sort of situation. I had been playing. I'd got back into the music business as a solo artist around about 2002, and I'd started sort of recording music again. And I'd started working with a number of people, including Townsend Music, who I still work with today, which is a distribution company. And the guy that runs that company, Bruce McKenzie, who's a very close friend of mine, brilliant person, been fully supportive of me all through my solo career. You know, I'd been putting out EPs and records and bits and pieces with him. And I'd done this. This EP. I've started doing these EPs, guitar, bass, and drums, which were little EPs of music that just enabled me to go out and play. I was having very little success with it, but I was playing a lot of shows and rebuilding my sort of reputation but I hadn't reconnected with the music business at large. There wasn't a lot of people within my system, if you like, the people that I was working with that were the same people that were in the real music business. It was very much the indie scene. It was very much like do it yourself, which has its massive advantages, and I learned a massive amount. And actually, I'm still in the indie scene in many ways as an artist myself now. So it was brilliant experience. But you have to couple that with getting involved with some of the bigger players, because otherwise you can't get on the bigger stages. You can't get involved with pluggers. You can't get involved with all the normal teams of people you need to try and advance yourself. So I played a gig at the Shepherd's Bush Empire, opening for Glenn Hughes, and Glenn's agent was a guy called Steve Strange. Now Steve Strange promoted the Little Angels years ago in Ireland, and he was an old mate. I hadn't seen him for years. I bumped into him backstage after the show, and he went, "Oh my God, you'd be amazing for Fastway." These were exact words he said to me as I'm walking literally in the corridor, I'd literally done my settlement with the promoter. I was about to go and get in the van and go home. And I literally bumped into Steve, who was a really excitable, massively positive, diminutive little Irish fella who is just, he's larger than life. Doesn't matter that he's, not very tall. He's the biggest guy you'll ever meet, he's like that. And he literally I bumped into him on the stairs in this corridor, and he went, "Oh my God, I saw the show. It was amazing. You'd be brilliant in Fastway." And I went, "Hang on, what are you on about?" And he literally said, "Look, here, take my number. Give me your number. I'm going to call you in a week." And I just thought, "Oh, whatever, man." I didn't really take any notice of it at all. But anyway, a week goes by. I'm sat at home, licking my wounds a little bit from the tour because I'd lost a bit of money. I was wondering what the hell to do next. Phone goes, and there's Steve Strange, who, unbeknownst to me, is one of the biggest agents on the planet. And he just said to me, "Look, I play drums. I'm big mates with Fast Eddie Clarke. Did you remember Fastway?" I went, "Yes, they were one of my favourite bands." So they were one of my favourite bands. That's no word of a lie. I had that first Fastway record when I was a pool hall attendant in Primrose Valley up in Scarborough. I remember listening to one summer, the whole summer of 1981, I would have thought it would have been when it first came out, or whenever it was. Probably 82, perhaps. I was a pool hall attendant. Did nothing but listen to that album, so I knew it really, really well. He says, "Look, would you consider being the singer in this band? We're going to do a load of festivals. We're doing Download. We're doing Fields of Rock. We're doing this, that, and the other." I went, "Of course. I've got no problem at all. I'd love to do it." So from literally playing in front of 50, 60, 100 people as a solo artist and the occasional opening slot, I was on the stage at Download opening in front of 12,000 people in one of the bigger tents. We went to, we played Wacken Festival. We just did all this amazing touring, all this rehearsals, and to be honest with you, that was the whole relaunch of me because Steve's a very powerful guy, and and he said, "Look, I want to manage you. Let's do it. I really want to work with you." So he became my sort of manager as well as my agent, and that led to lots of opportunities, including meeting the guys from Gun, and working with those lads, and making that little record with them and touring with them, and because I'll tell you what I did. I just thought to myself, I thought, you know what? The rules have changed. There are no rules in the music business anymore. I can't just put my eggs in one basket. I've got to be available. I want to do lots of things. I want to meet and work with lots of different people. And why not? Because I'd watch someone like Dave Grohl be, involved with, the Foo Fighters, having come out of Nirvana, and then he was involved with Queens of the Stone Age, and he produced people, blah blah blah. He worked with all, and lots and lots of things. I thought, if he can do it, I can do it too. You don't have to have one thing anymore. I want to do lots of things. So subsequently, I sort of then went on to that, having that sort of train of thought. I went and worked with Gunn. That was great while it lasted. But the situation's changed, and I ended up sort of coming out of that situation and jumping into working in Dio's Disciples. And again, I felt that was an incredible privilege, and blah blah blah. So I've always just sort of taken things as they've come, really, and just said yes to most things that I thought were high quality enough and good enough, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, you mentioned right at the start, there's two names. Well, two of the names you mentioned was Dio and Saxon, and you just mentioned Dio's Disciples there because these two names would come back, wouldn't they, later on in your career with Dio's Disciples and then producing Saxon as well.
Extraordinary. I mean, I'm not a religious guy. I think most people who know me know that. I think I'm quite a spiritual person, and I don't think organised religions have got the right to sort of hold sway over that ideology. I do believe that things happen for a reason. I've kind of got a sense of things being visited on you, and a lot of that's to do with your positivity and your approach to life and all the rest of it. And I do think that one thing leads to another, and I do think in your life, if you're open-minded enough, things can come back to you. You know what I mean? Whether it's good or bad. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good. You hope it's going to be mainly good. But just taking the Saxon thing for an example, I was the biggest Saxon fan. I absolutely adored that band. Wheels of Steel is still one of my favourite records of all time. I absolutely love Biff. As a singer and as a band as a whole, absolutely incredible band. And still are to this day. And so to end up, I mean, I can remember I hadn't. We Little Angels had toured with Saxon, done about maybe half a dozen shows, maybe a few more in Europe, and at the time they were not cool. I mean, they just weren't cool. And we'd gone into Europe with them, but they were still selling lots of tickets and still having big records. But we thought they were a bit of a joke. I'll be honest. And I secretly still loved them, but I'd still be laughing with everyone going, "Oh yeah, Saxon, what a bunch of dinosaurs, what a bloody joke," and all this, But we went and did this. I can remember we specifically went and did this gig in Ghent, and they absolutely blew me away again. It was an absolutely packed hall, playing all the classics and all the rest of it. So I was kind of back in love with them, even though I wouldn't admit it, So anyway, time passes. I'm doing the Fastway thing. We go and play this show in Loud Park in Japan, in Tokyo, and Saxon are on the bill. And I can remember me and Biff and Steve Strange, the drummer of Saxon, and my agent, were sat in this. I don't know what the hell is a sake bar in about 4 a.m. in Tokyo, all sat talking, and me and Biff just hit it off like a house on fire. I mean, he was like my bigger brother or something. I was just like, and I couldn't believe I was sat next to one of my biggest heroes who was just the coolest guy. There he is, still doing it, still sort of, in his late 50s, still kicking ass, still making amazing music. And I mean, absolutely hairs on the back of the neck. I was like stood at the side of the stage when they played Wheels of Steel at Loud Park, and this is just, it was like hog heaven for me. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here. It's absolutely incredible. So we became mates, Biff, me and him, we were just thoroughly good friends, and it was just extraordinary, to sort of pinching myself about it, really, And we became such good friends that we used to, we used to hang out together, and I used to go to his house. He'd come and hang out with us, and all the rest of it. And the families got to know each other a little bit, and all the rest of it. And eventually, I sort of plucked up the courage, and I'd been invited by Biff to do some backing vocals on the Into the Labyrinth record, I think it was. And they flew me over to Germany, and I sort of spent about 3 days with them in I forget where it was, doesn't matter, in the studio working with them and just doing a bit of BVs and having a bit of fun and all the rest of it. And then I went to watch them play at some open air festival. But they did that album campaign. But I was always a little bit disappointed in a way with the sound of their records, their recent records, because they always sounded like Euro metal to me. It always sounded like very clean, very thin, very sort of pro-tooled and very sort of technical. And the Saxon that I loved were this balls to the wall, open-ended, breathable rock and roll band that left the mistakes in, warts and all. It was all about guts and glory and all about working class mentality, all about shouting from the rooftops. You know what I mean? All that stuff where the energy was coming out the speakers because it was so perfectly recorded. And I sort of plucked up the courage, and when they finished that campaign, I said, look, Biff, would you entertain the idea of me? Because I'd started to produce people. I'd produced the Virgin Marys, and I was working with a couple of other people and having a couple of projects. Would you consider me as a producer for Saxon? And God love him, he said, I'll ask the band. So he went and asked the band, and the band went, Okay, but the only thing that they'd heard that I'd done was I'd produced the Fastway record, which I'm pretty proud of. But it was one of my first early productions, and Eddie Clark and I didn't really see eye to eye about the way that the production ought to be. He didn't like modern records. He didn't want it to sound like the Foo Fighters. And he was adamant about that. And he also had very, very strong opinions about how he wanted to record it. I had strong opinions about how to record it. So it was a little bit of a compromise, really. I mean, I'm still proud of it. I still think some of the songs are fantastic, but it's not the record I really ultimately wanted to make, I think, ultimately.
Yeah.
So that was the only point of reference they had. And they weren't that blown away by it. So I ended up going to a meeting with them and sort of said, look, guys, give me a chance. I think I can help you. I would like to try and help you. Record an album that gets back to the sort of days when you used to sort of turn the amps up to 11 and just play as loud as you could and hope for the best, you know. And that's what we did. They very, very graciously and incredibly trustingly said, okay, get involved. But I co-produced it with Biff because, I mean, you don't really produce Biff Byford. You know, Biff knows what he wants to do, and that's that, you know. But Biff was incredibly gracious. He opened up the whole floor to me. I was involved in, you know, the full production of that record and instigated a lot of the ways that we recorded it. And so, you know, can you imagine me sat behind that mixing desk with Biff sat in front of me through the glass, about to sing the takes on the album, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm recording one of my biggest heroes. You know, it's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, I'm having to press the talk back and go, could you do that bit again, Biff? It was a bit out of tune, or or something like that. So, really amazing. You know, absolutely incredible. But what was brilliant about it is that Biff's such a clever man and such a smart person, and also incredibly. He's a bit belligerent, and you know, he's a bit, you know, he's incredibly. He's sort of one-minded, you know. But what's great about it is that he knows what he wants, and he refuses to accept substitutes, you know. So you have to work within that parameter, and I found that a real challenge. But I also think I learned a massive amount from him, you know, and I still continue to do so. So that was incredible. And you know, again, the next thing, just to cut a long story short, because I am rambling like hell. I know I am here. Is that you know, I was a, you know, like I've explained, a massive Ronnie Dio fan. I mean, Ronnie was the last word in rock and roll singers to me. I mean, him, David Coverdale, you know, Robert Plant and Biff and a couple of other people. You know, there was very few people I really appreciated as singers, really. You know, but Ronnie was the top of that tree. You know, and I mean, have you? Is it okay to keep talking? I'm sorry if it's taking forever telling these tales. You got enough time?
Toby, you keep going as long as you want. This is great. I'm loving it. Yeah.
Right, okay. Well, I'll tell you this tale. This is God's honest truth. Absolutely God's honest truth. When I was 14 years old, the first ever open air concert I went to was Monsters of Rock, when Dio were second on after Diamond Head. Now, I was such a big Dio fan that the album had come out, Holy Diver had come out the spring before or the winter before or something. I'd got the album, fallen in love with it. It had changed my world. And then they were announced as playing at the Monsters of Rock Festival. And I was like, I've got to be there. I don't care what it takes. I was 14 or something, 14 or 15. And at the time, there weren't many festivals. There was literally Monsters of Rock. That was it. You know, I mean, I think Glastonbury wasn't even big. It was occasional. And I think Reading Festival, that was it. Because Reading's too far away. I don't even know where London is. I'm that flipping parochial. You know what I mean? I haven't a clue. You know, I know it's just south somewhere. You know, so I've seen Dio announce. I said to my mum and dad, I've got to go. And they went, I mean, thank God for my mum and dad being such cool people. They went, that's absolutely fine, as long as someone who's old enough can accompany you and look after you, because we don't want you getting lost amongst all those hundreds of thousands of people. So what I did was, the night before, so I get my ticket, I'm dead excited, I've got my mate who's taking me on the bus, we're going on this bus package trip and all the rest of it. So the night before, I nicked one of my mum's tablecloths. I didn't nick it, I said, can I have one? She said, of course you can. I got a white tablecloth, and I literally drew Ronnie James Dio's face on this cloth, and I put Ronnie Dio above it, Holy Diver underneath it. And I took it with me I wanted to wave it in the crowd, you know. So anyway, I got off the bus and I'm immediately lost amongst these people. My friend does one. He's gone off into the crowd. He's already drunk anyway by this point. I'm not. I don't drink anyway because I'm 14 or something. So I'm just wandering about shitting myself. Then I sort of got myself and I thought, you know what? I'm here. I'm going to enjoy the day. I don't care what happens. I'll find them later. So I managed to get my way to the front of the Monsters Rock, literally on the front row, right up against the barrier. Ronnie comes out. I'm in absolute raptures. I can't flipping believe it. Here's me big hero stood in front of the stage. absolutely having this fantastic time. I can't even believe it. And I managed to chuck my banner onto the stage, and it landed between his monitors. It literally landed, and he picked it up and held it up to the crowd.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
So there's Ronnie holding my banner. Honestly, I nearly shit myself. It's unbelievable. So of course, this is incredible. This is like the biggest kind of like moment of my entire life. And I just thought to myself, oh my God, I want to do this. You know, I've got to be in a band that does this. And I went home, and 2 weeks later, because I think Kerrang at the time came out bi-weekly. It didn't come out weekly at the time. They, in the letters page, there was a picture of Ronnie holding my banner in the letters page.
Oh.
So as a kid, you know, like, it was just a fledgling rock and roller. That was just extraordinary. So we could, you know, jump forward 20 years. I meet Wendy Dio back at a party for the Classic Rock Awards. Got talking to her, and she's like, "Oh, we're doing this this tribute, you know, live tribute, and you know, perhaps you could come and sing on the album, you know, because we're going to do a live album." I was like, "Oh, of course I would." You know, she wanted me to sing. I think Long Live Rock and Roll or something. So of course I'm telling her this tale of me when I was a kid and all the rest of it. Didn't think anything of it. I get a phone call from Strangey, Steve Strange, my agent, literally on New Year's Day, saying, "I've got you the gig in Dio Disciples. It's going to be a world tour. We're going to do this. We're going to do that." And you know, long story short, I end up singing as a co-singing situation with Tim Ripper Owens, going around the planet, literally around the planet, all across America, right across Europe, you know, into Russia, South America, you know, basically doing. You know, it's not a tribute. It was a celebration of Ronnie's music. It was you know, it was all the band that were in his band. The last sort of setup. It was Simon Wright and you know, and all those guys that were in the very last records that Ronnie made, and it was an absolute privilege. I mean, I couldn't believe it. The first time I stood on that stage and sung, you know, "Long Live Rock and Roll" on my own. You know, doing that tune and then singing, you know, you know, all those great. I mean, there's too many to mention. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Stand Up and Shout. You know, you just name them, and we were doing them all. You know, to do that and have the blessing of his wife and all those guys that were in the band who were incredibly welcoming. I mean, I wasn't a name in America. I had to go and rehearse. I went to LA for 3 weeks to rehearse with the band. You know, I mean. Just extraordinary experience, and you know, we ended up doing Download, which I don't know if you were there at all, but that event was a bit of a homecoming because we played on the Ronnie James Dio stage, you know, and we were special guests there for that, and just extraordinary to see all these grown men weeping. You know, that's literally what it was. You know, we were doing, you know, I can't remember exactly what Stargazer I think it was or something. You know, and it was just extraordinary to watch these people sort of crying their eyes out because Ronnie was never going to be there again, but yet they were hearing their favourite songs sung by these two guys with his band. It was just extraordinary to take part in, and you know, I thoroughly enjoyed it. You know.
Oh, that's brilliant! What on earth would the 14-year-old you have thought? You know, if you'd have known then of what was going to happen.
Oh, mate, listen, I honestly, I can't explain to you what an impact it had on me. You know, I mean, you know, I told all the boys in the band that, and you know, Craig Goldie, the guitar player, I can remember telling him the tale. We were touring America, and I was sat in the bus with him, and I remember him telling the tale, and he said, "Man, it's just like I've got cold shivers down my spine. It's like I've just got a ghost walk through me, man. It's unbelievable." You know, he's getting all really spiritual about it. But it was like, because it was like that. It was just like, crying out loud, you know, how does that happen? There has to be some kind of sort of map that everybody has in their lives to have these things happen to them. And I don't care what you do, whether you're a singer or whatever else, I don't care. I think everyone has these things. It just depends on whether you recognise it or can understand it or interpret it somehow, you know. But it was pretty stark for me, you know, amazing, you know, absolutely amazing.
Oh, yeah. And you said then you went to Monsters of Rock from an early age. It must have been a special moment then, the first time that you stepped foot onto the stage in Donington.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I did it with Fastway in one of the tents, and brilliant reception, had a great time with that, you know. I then did it with Dio's Disciples, on the Dio stage. Again, unbelievable experience. But then really the crowning glory of it was to play with the Little Angels, you know, 2 years ago, as one of the main, you know, sort of I think third or fourth on the second stage, on the classic rock stage. you know, we played in front of 60,000 people that day, you know, and to hear everyone singing the words and appreciating the band again after so many years away, nearly 20 years away, was, well, I mean, it's not an over exaggeration to say it nearly brought me to the verge of tears, because it really meant that much to us, you know, it really did. You know, we felt so privileged to sort of know that our music had meant that much to our audience. You know, to come all those years later, to sort of come cold after not doing anything, and do that, and to have that sort of reception, especially in the pissing rain, because it was absolutely torrential rain, and the audience didn't care. They stayed. You know, they could easily have walked away and not been there, but it was, oh man, it was amazing, absolutely extraordinary.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure you get asked this to death, and I apologise now for asking it, but every Little Angels fan will say, "Is there any chance of another reunion at any point in the future?" You know.
I know. Well, the short answer is no, there isn't, and I think, and there's a really good reason for it, is that we feel very strongly that the Little Angels were of the moment. We feel that our records that we made and stopped making ultimately were from that period, never to be repeated. We never wanted to be, once the band had finished and once we got talking about doing this again, we all said we just don't want to be one of those bands that comes back again and again and again, always having a reformation, always having the final tour and all that stuff. We just want to be a bright spark in the history of British music, for those that care about it. We just want to be one of those bands that go, you know what, they never sold out, they never changed, it never became something that was like, you know, oh, here they come again, you know, and trying to recapture the energy of what it was before. Because you know what, we're not 25 years old anymore. You know, I'm 46. You know, I don't want to make the same music again. I don't want to keep trying to be something that's already gone. Life's about progression. Life's about new experiences. And the Little Angels was the most unbelievable experience of my life, apart from getting married and having my children. You know, and I don't want to put a taint on that. I think we came back, did one Reformation tour. We didn't record any new music. I think we did justice to the music. I think we went out and played that tour like we'd never been away, and it felt fantastic. But you know what? By the end of it, we all felt that was it. We all knew that we'd sort of sated our thirst for it. And that's it.
That's good. I mean, I'm glad you said that. That's a really good way to think of it, because I know, speaking as a fan, you know, one of the bad things is when you, even if it's a band that you really love and you want them to come back, and then there's always, oh, they're not as good as they were.
Oh, exactly.
You know, it is good to, you know, finish it there on a high, on a top note too, which you did do too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was brilliant. Brilliant again, another brilliant experience. And the wonderful thing was, we all made friends. You know, we were all mates. It wasn't. We didn't have any reason to be there apart from just to be there for our fans and for ourselves. There was no record support. There was no promoters involved apart from just the people we'd installed rather, sort of to promote the tour for us on our behalf. There was no great big, you know, sort of situation. It was just really simple. It was a complete joy. It was, quite honestly, I think it's the best Little Angels tour we ever did. Seriously.
Oh yeah. Now I started this episode mentioned about seeing you on the acoustic tour. How did that tour come about? What was the planning for that?
Well, I mean, you know, like we've been talking about, I've been my long game is to be is record production and writing. You know, and so there's a kind of situation where I've become on the other side of the glass. You know, I'm not doing as much as an artist, and so I kind of got to the point last year when I was, you know, making, you know, I had the Answers album was out. You know, the Virgin Mary's record was doing really well in America. I'd just worked with Katie Melly, we were songwriting with her, and two songs of mine I got on her record. You know, I was just about to record the Brew album. You know, I'm talking to various other bands about production for this year. And so I was starting to feel like a backroom boy, you know, and I just sort of thought, you know what? I don't want to stop being a singer. I've just done the Angels. That was great. You know, I still feel like I'm young enough to be a rock singer and be a singer of one situation or another. And, you know, I just felt I needed to do some recording. So I just basically went in the studio and just, over a period of time, wrote a few tunes, wrote a few little ideas, and got into a situation where I was working with some mates of mine, that I'd worked with for a long time to produce this little bit of music, and never had any real big intentions with it really. Just wanted to put it out and just sort of see what happened, you know. And because I didn't want to put a band together, because that's very difficult, that's complicated, and takes a lot more effort than just doing an acoustic tour, because you have to, there's a lot more people to pay, it's a lot more expensive, it's a lot more effort, because you've got to rehearse, blah blah blah, with lots of other people trying to get everyone's schedules together. It's difficult because I don't have a record label. It's costly, so it's very very tough. So I just thought, I'll just go and do the acoustic thing, because I've been doing it quite a lot. I've done the acoustic stage at Download. I've opened for FM, I've opened for the Union, a couple of other people, and I've always loved it, always enjoyed it. And so that was it, really. I just thought, I'll just talk to my agents, and I'll talk to some promoters I work with, and they all went, yeah, that's a great idea. So it was just a case of, I'll just go do this on my own and see what happens. And it was just absolutely brilliant, and I'm going to continue to do it. I'm going to do some festivals this year as an acoustic artist on the acoustic stages, and I most likely probably will do another tour at the end of this year, towards the end of Christmas again, and maybe not do quite as many dates, but I think I'll probably have another go at it, because I just really enjoy it.
That's good. Oh, fingers crossed you get round. Come to North Wales and go to Norwich, and then we'll both be happy.
All good.
Just as an aside on that, I've got to say, one thing I saw on the tour, and I bought one, which I don't often see now. This is going back to the 80s. Long sleeve tour shirts.
Oh yes.
I bought that. Wow, I absolutely love
yeah. Hey, they're coming back in, pal. They're coming back in. Everybody's got them now. So I think, they're really great. I was really chuffed with the merchandise, actually. I really liked the whole imagery of it all. So worked well, I think.
It did. I was wearing mine yesterday.
Good lad.
Right, for the listeners now, Toby, and me and Thom, what are your present plans, and what have you got planned for the future that you can tell us about?
Oh God! Again, how long you got?
We've got plenty.
Lots and lots of things. I am, currently working with Saxon at the moment, funnily enough. And Biff is going to do. I think Biff's got plans to make a solo record, and obviously there will be another Saxon record. And so I'm currently tentatively doing some songwriting with Biff for possibly one or both projects. So that's quite exciting.
Excellent.
I've been asked to co-write with a number of artists, some of which are just in the planning stages at the moment. Some are new artists. I'm working with a couple of very, very new bands for production that are I think very exciting. There's a band called Four Wheel Drive, who are a London band, who are like an AC/DC-esque, although that's doing them a disservice to say they're a copyist band, because they're not. They've just got that kind of like Three Chords and the Truth style attitude to rock and roll. So I'm working with those guys, and that's the developing project that we're hoping going to go on to making an album. So that's really good. So we're just doing some initial recording on that pretty soon. I found an amazing band from Leeds, who I'm going to tell you who they're called, the Treason Kings, who I'm building a similar situation with. Because what I want to do is I want to give a bit back to the business. I don't want this to just be about me taking a paycheck for producing a band that have already got a deal or something. Mm-hmm. Although I do like those gigs, clearly. What I would like to do is I'd like to find some bands. I've been on the lookout for bands. I mean, I've been announcing on my Facebook for quite some time. I'm looking for bands to work with, But I've got very strict criteria. I don't want to work. I've got to work with bands that are extraordinary. I've got to work with people that have real things to say, that have unique positions and unique music, because what's the point? There's no point just retreading old steps all the time. I want to work with things that challenge and bring a different complexion to something that perhaps is well known in a way. So a couple of really cool things like that. Like I say, I've got some touring hopefully in the summer, which I'm looking at. I've got some one-off shows as an acoustic artist, what I've been asked to do as well, so that's pretty good. And I'm talking to a lot of people at the moment. I mean, January, February are always planning months for me, for things further down the year, because the record labels don't start spending money and wanting to release budgets and all the rest of it until further down the line, unless they've got something in play already. And so I'm talking to quite a few exciting management companies and labels about production work. So yeah, and I'm not turning down the possibility, or ruling out the possibility rather, of being in a rock band again, but that needs to be something that I feel artistically, specifically, really turns me on, and can go the distance. I don't want to be out of the back of a transit van ever again in my life. I've done enough of that. So really, I want to. I'm there is a kind of loose plan with my management, because I've signed a recent management deal as well as a new publishing deal. So things are changing and going into a different arena as well. So there is a loose plan to sort of keep an ear out for potentially other artists at a similar level to myself that we could maybe collaborate on something and create, make an album and then release it and then think about touring it. But that may be a year or two away. I don't know. I'm just sort of considering my options with that one.
That sounds really good. Lots of stuff on the horizon then.
Yeah, I mean, I keep my ear to the ground, Dave. It's what I feel is that. I mean, I was working on a film last year. Similarly, bizarrely, having been in the film business as an extra, I got asked to sort of to present some music for a small British movie, a science fiction horror film, which has just been finished. And I did a load of work with the producers and the director, and created some music. And they eventually decided not to use any music at all, bizarrely. But anyway, I really enjoyed the experience, and so I'm talking to my publishers about sort of approaching small filmmakers that need music doing on spec that I could work with in a similar way that I would work with a little band, a small band. So I would like to develop that because I really enjoyed that experience, and it really suited me actually because I've been such a big film fan all of my life that it's a kind of I sort of understand the language of film just as a spectator, because it's always been there in my life, and I feel that the two married together are the perfect. It's almost like the dream ticket for me, really. Is working on films, as a music composer would be fantastic. So I'm hoping to do a bit more of that. But that again, that's a very difficult thing to break into because a lot of guys do that, and you've kind of got to get yourself attached to a director, and that director's then got to become successful, and that can sort of lead you into the business, But I would like to do a bit more of that, and we'll just have to see,
Oh, that sounds good. 'Cause am I right in saying that you've got a home cinema as well?
I do. I have a projector and a massive screen, and I absolutely love it.
Good. I'll put you on the spot. Seeing as with the 80s Picture House, favourite 80s movies?
Oh goodness me! How long have you got again? I'm an absolute sucker for Schwarzenegger. I can't help it. I'm a populist. What can you do? I love Conan. I absolutely love Conan. Conan, the original Conan the Barbarian movie. I absolutely love that. Oh goodness me! So many. I love the Die Hard films. What I loved about that period was the explosion of fantastical, movies. Because since sort of Spielberg blew the doors off of, of big time, big scale. Enormous movies with him and Lucas with Star Wars, and then subsequently with the Indiana Jones movies and all the rest of it. That was exactly the period I grew up in. That's when I was 14 years old, 15 years old. And so that period of filmmaking, even though it's not my favourite period, actually, I've got to say, my favourite period in a lot of ways is the 70s. I like the sort of Parallax View and All the President's Men and all those sorts of films. Those are sort of my favourite period. The Exorcist is my favourite film of all time, as an example. But the 80s were, as a kid, they were like big and glossy and glorious, and it was always too sweet to last forever, if you know what I mean. So there you go.
And with The Exorcist being your favourite film, is horror films your favourite genre, or you just cover all of them?
I kind of cover all of them. I do have a kind of special place in my heart for, I think, science fiction fantasy is a very broad sort of genre. Mainly because I sort of find the sort of storytelling, especially in recent years, actually, I do think the noughties had some fantastic movies. If you think about sort of, not so much the Matrix trilogy, but certainly the Matrix, and going on to things like, AI and things like that. I mean, I love all those films. I think Spielberg made some great films. I love the War of the Worlds. I'm not a lot of people like it, but I really, really liked it. I think there's always something great to watch in a Spielberg film, irrespective of what he does. He's just an absolute master of cinema. So it's hard to sort of deny that. But I love comedy. The Python movies are sort of incredible, incredible movies, and I still go back to them, and that's the measure of it for me. It's movies that I go back to and go back to. Like Close Encounters, as an example, is a film that I revisit all the time. But I'm an enormous Western fan. I mean, I love the Sergio Leone movies. Good, the Bad and the Ugly is definitely my second or third favourite film of all time, and I watch that time and time and time again and see something new. And Clint Eastwood was my favourite movie star of that period. For me, it's just about the quality of the filmmaking and the storytelling. It's all about the story, just like it is with the songwriting. That's all about telling a story. It's the same thing for films for me.
Oh God, yeah. You've quoted some great films there. Good, the Bad and the Ugly, Clint Eastwood, brilliant.
Yeah, can't beat that.
Where can everybody find and follow you online? What's the best place to do that?
Well, I've got a sort of standalone website, which is just www.tobyjepson.com, which is kind of more angled towards my production stuff. Really, it's more about people finding me as a producer, and because really Facebook and Facebook and Twitter, just like everyone else in this business is doing, is that has become the centre of my sort of totem pole, if you like. It's where I sort of shout from and all the rest of it. And I actually really, I was reluctant to get involved in Facebook, but it is a brilliant tool and a brilliant way of sort of interacting with your audience, and I use it as that. I use it as a fan-based interactive space, but and also a place to rant from, which I quite like doing quite a bit. I'm not one of these naysayers about the new technology. I think we're in a world of a modern world of miracles, and we should embrace it and make the best of it. There's always going to be bad sides to it, but I think it's largely good.
Oh, it is. Yeah. I mean, you would. I'm sure being a celebrity as you are, that you should get some crazy people throwing some shit your way now and again too.
I do, but by and large, people are incredibly respectful. There's very little negativity actually, because I think because the great thing about Facebook and Twitter is that if people want to follow you, they'll follow you because they're a fan.
Yeah.
There aren't that many trolls out there that actually, in reality, I think there's a lot of knee jerk, there's a lot of this kind of history. And the only problem I find with Facebook in many ways is that the histrionics of people get amped up to a point of stupidity, and people sort of like all of a sudden everyone's a politician, and I'm guilty of that too. I often, in recent weeks, I've been sort of making some sort of points about various things because I'm quite a political person too, and I'm very, very, very socially aware. I've got 3 daughters, I've got a mortgage, I've got everything going on like everyone else, and so I'm sort of, and I do get sick to death of seeing pop stars and actors pretending that they're politicians and thinking they've got a right to sort of say make big statements. But I also believe the contrary to that is that actually it's a brilliant way of being able to sort of vent your frustrations. And if you have other people that have those frustrations too, it's just a great way to have a conversation. Because actually the reality is not that many people really that are friends with me on Facebook. I mean, all right, I've got 5,000 friends, but how many of the people of that really react to what I say? And so it's just a small way of being able to sort of have this kind of global reach that people are allowed. It's a great way for people to be able to let off steam or be happy or be frank or whatever they want to be, and I think there's something really, really special about that.
Oh, it is, yeah. And again, speaking as fans, I mean, I know both me and Tom are delighted at the technology now that we can fire off a message on Twitter or on Facebook, and then the likes of yourself that are kind enough to send us a reply. It makes a day as a fan too. It's really appreciated.
Well, I totally get that, and I think there is a line though. I mean, I've often said in interviews that the only problem I have with Facebook and Twitter and social media is that part of the allure for me when I was a fan, and still am a fan, obviously, of music, but when I was a kid specifically, was that my rock and roll idols like Freddie Mercury and people like that, and Ronnie and Biff and all that, they were untouchable. They were people that I didn't know where they came from. They came from this magical world of rock and roll that had this kind of mystique and mystery surrounding it. And there's a lot to be said for that, because what it does is it creates this mystique and this sort of sense of otherworldliness, which makes the music even more potent. And I think there's a sad lack of that, actually. I think that's the only thing I would say, is that really in a way that I don't want to, because I make every effort to I don't tell people what food I eat and what coloured socks I'm wearing. I don't, but I don't want to know, what Tom Hanks, why is he photographing his food and putting it on Facebook? I don't understand it. It seems ridiculous to me. And but so I do try and draw a line where it's not about the minutiae of my life. It's more about statements about what I'm doing, and perhaps some discourse and some discussion about something I think is very important.
Yeah.
But I do draw a line on photographing food and putting pictures on Facebook, and I'll just brush my teeth and all that nonsense.
I know where you're coming from with all that mystique and everything, because I'm like a huge Kiss fan and have been since the 70s. And when I first got into them, I was 14. It's 1979. I didn't even think they were human. There was Gene Simmons has got a cow's tongue, and there was all these different rumours. You didn't know who they were, and now you got Gene Simmons' family jewels, and you see him walking around in this pink onesie, and and this was the god of thunder to everybody, and then he's walking around in this pink onesie.
Oh, I know, it's crazy, and I think if there's a lesson to be learned from all of this, is that actually we need to re-engage the public and the fans and anyone out there who's a music fan in that stuff, because and I don't know how you're ever going to do it if we're ever going to do it, but I think actually it's down to the artist to not allow the access quite so much, and in a way I think that makes it better. But I think a bit of access is fine, but I think at the same time there has to be a bit of a line of delineation. I just think that's the relationship. That I don't want people to be in awe of me at all. But what I feel is, I think there needs to be that relationship needs to be maintained somehow, and I'd like to keep a little bit back, so it's just not quite so exposed. That's all. And I think I still massively appreciate the fact that I don't know that much about the people I really admire, apart from what I read in interviews that they themselves have given. I think there's something really special about that, and I actually don't want to know, all the minutiae. So, we'll see how the future pans out. Perhaps you'll have people, massive stars, all of a sudden doing huge, podcasts to everyone's houses or something like that, which I think would be a disaster. But there we go.
Well, what we'll do, Toby, we'll put all the links to the way that people can keep in touch with you on this week's podcast notes on our webpage. We'll do all of that. Please keep us updated with everything that you're doing, and we'll happily help promote it, and we will be at whatever gigs that you do around us. That's for sure.
I appreciate it. Well, thanks ever so much for the opportunity, and I really appreciate it. It's nice to talk to you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Toby. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, my son. Take care then.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Cheers. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, Thom, in the 22 in conversations that we've done now, that has to rank right up there.
Ah, superb, wasn't it? As always.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And to give us some, just looking at the time, almost an extra hour. That was.
I know. Yeah. I mean,
we also only plot for an hour, and it's 8:47. We started at 7, so.
Yeah, that's
fantastic.
So kind of him to do that, and what amazing stories, and what a great guy. I mean, what a career he's had so far, and what a career he's still got ahead of him too.
Definitely.
Yeah, fingers crossed he gets to play North Wales again, mate. Definitely around Norwich.
Yeah. I hope so.
Oh yeah, we'll be badgering him to make sure that he does. Right, so as I mentioned earlier, look on the website, and there'll be all the ways that you can find and follow what Toby's doing. Please follow him on Twitter and like his Facebook page, and listen to those of you that are listening to this and haven't heard any of his music. Please, God, buy his music and listen to it, because you're in for a treat. That's for sure. Thom, how can people find and follow us online?
Of course, our website is 80spicturehouse.co.uk. You can find us on Twitter at 80spicturehouse. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/80spicturehouse. If you need to email us, our email is contact@80spicturehouse.co.uk. Alternatively, at the top of our website, there's a contact us form, and we'll get that too. And if you could leave us a review on iTunes, that would be amazing. If you're not listening to this on iTunes, if you just do a search for the 80s Picture House, you shall find us there.
And that's us done for another episode again, mate.
It is, yep. So, superb.
Oh, yeah. Right, so it's the time to thank Toby for joining us on the show, to thank you for listening to us, and we'll be back very soon with another episode.